wire from contemporary politics, but that unusual being who's also a public intellectual, a psephologist, a scholar, an activist, and also the founder of the Swaraj Party. So somebody who's taken that deep dive into politics and doesn't just only talk about it. There are so many issues which are at the center of national debate. The last time we were here, we did one of those, which was about one nation, one election. Today, we'd like to look at exit polls, predicting elections, outcomes, the caste census and the uniform civil code, if we have time, but definitely the caste census, which is really at the heart of a lot of national debate. And so to discuss all of that and these big public issues, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Yogendra Yadav on stage. Yogendra, we're jumping several centuries, but a lot of those heated debates are still the same. We've just coming out of 3 elections, which has been at the heart of a lot of discussion. One was the national elections, which really went differently to how, say, Prashant Kishore had predicted it. You were the only one who really got those numbers right. And it seemed as if the BJP's wings had been cut a little bit. And then we had the Haryana elections, which is really your Karamsthal. The prediction on that and the outcomes was completely different. And now the Maharashtra election, where you've literally said it's jaw drop, it's inexplicable, and is there an X factor to it, So I wanted to start with just one question. Do you think that exit polls have lived out their use and they should just be stopped? Or do they have some function which is important for our public life?
Thanks, Shoma. One of the reasons I came for a conversation with you is that, unlike many others, you actually read. And you must have actually seen that psephology is my previous birth, my Purva Janma. I have actually very little interest in it. In 2012, I had officially said goodbye to it. In 2024, I was forced to come out of that retirement because I felt that the entire national media was hoodwinking the country. And I felt it was my duty. If you're a doctor, you've retired, you don't want to practice it, but you're walking on the road and you see a patient lying. And then you see, oh my God, I can't just say I'm in retirement mode. So just as a duty, I had to come out. And I had a certain view, I had a certain reading, and because I thought the entire national media was hoodwinking the country, I thought it's my duty, my dharma, to stand on rooftop and to shout as loud as I possibly could. That was the end of my duty. It so happened that I got it right. I don't take particular credit in it. I think there was an element of fluke in getting the exact numbers right. Most polls don't get the numbers right, and my getting the number exactly right was actually a fluke. But I do take some satisfaction in the fact that I could point in the right direction, which is what the entire media was not doing. So honestly, my interest in psephology ended there, and after the election, national election, I said to everyone, thank you very much. I was forced to do it, as I said in Hindi. मैं भविष्य बताने का काम करता था, अब भविष्य बनाने का काम करता हूँ. I have really no interest about Haryana. And so to me, the larger interest in elections is this. To my mind, 2024 was not a parliamentary election. It had the appearance of a parliamentary election, but it was actually a plebiscite. It was a plebiscite which invited the Indian population to put its thumb impression on whatever Modi ji had done in the last 10 years and whatever he would do in the years to come. As they say in property deals, general power of attorney. That's what we were required to give. And the net consequence of that would have been that we would have transited from competitive authoritarianism. Let's not make mistakes about it. We are not in democracy. We are in a system that should be correctly described as competitive authoritarianism. What you have in Turkey, what you have in Hungary, we are similar to that. And we were about to make a transition from competitive authoritarianism to electoral autocracy of the kind that you have in Russia, Mr. Putin's democracy. That's electoral autocracy. And the real significance of 2024 election was that the people of India applied a brake to that. They said, thank you very much, no. That is the real significance. The misfortune is that while the people of India did this, opposition parties thought they were the ones who had done it. And obviously, once you start imagining things of this kind, then you are in for shocks, which is what happened in Haryana, which is what happened in Maharashtra, and so on. Sadly, we are back in that battle to say, I mean, it's not that 2024 had brought us out of that completely, but it had put a brake. We as a country were taking a dive towards dictatorship. The people applied a brake. The task of reversing the vehicle and going back on the journey was still pending. And we find after these 3 elections that we have not moved at all. So the danger persists. That's the big picture. Honestly, I have zero interest in exit polls.
So I'm going to come back to just that original question, whether they have any value. But what you just said, Yogendra, the last time we had speakers on these big national debates, we did have different perspectives so that, it's multifaceted. This time it's because you and I, and mostly I'm aligned with you, but I'm going to have to play a bit of the devil's advocate and ask you that, do you think that it's awkward when a country as polyphonous as India, and like you just said, that, the people actually vote very wisely. There's often a sense that, it's an illiterate electorate. But if you look at the history of India, it's voted each time with great wisdom, giving power, taking back power, curtailing power, etc. But when the elections don't go the way that one's own mindset is, then there's a hesitation to accept that, So one, the talk of EVMs begin, which is, like the Supreme Court has itself turned it down. Secondly, to say that now it's still going to go into dictatorship, but when a large majority of people are voting for a particular party, is it not time to think, what is that party doing that is speaking to the people that one feels that one is representing? So what do you think happened in Maharashtra and Haryana?
Both things are true, Shoma. We, of course, have to understand why is it that people vote for Mr. Modi and and for the BJP, just as American intellectuals and liberals must think, why is it that the US has voted for someone like Mr. Trump? Of course, these are very serious questions. And I would not wish them away. At the same time, it is also our duty to point out whenever there are elements that violate the boundary lines. So we have to do both. I do know that there are friends who would cry foul whenever the result is not to their convenience. It so happens that I'm not one of them. Since you read, you would know that in 2019, when Mr. Modi won, large number of liberal progressive people said, this is EVM, he's done it. And I wrote to say, no, it is not EVM. He has rigged your mind. He has not rigged the machines. Similarly, in 2020, when Mr. Yogi Adityanath won in an election where I campaigned against him, when he won, once again, a lot of people said it's rigging. I said, no, I've traveled. The fact is that he enjoys popularity. I may not like it. I think there's something to be done about it. But let's not wish away our political responsibility. So having said all this, I would say, and having watched election for 35 years, and obviously there must have been many, many, many elections whose results I did not like. There are 3 elections in recent memory that stand out. Madhya Pradesh of last year, Haryana this year, and Maharashtra last week, where I simply cannot understand what really happened. On Maharashtra, let me be absolutely blunt, the MVA, which is to say Congress and allies, deserved to lose the election because they took it for granted, because after the election they thought, because in Maharashtra, in every parliamentary election, after that, BJP tends to do a little worse. So they assumed, ab to ho gaya, ab to chief minister settle karna hai, you know. So that's what they were doing, while BJP had a game plan. BJP was doing very systematic work and so on. So if the Mahayuti, which is to say BJP and allies, if they manage to cover their deficit, if they manage to cover the historic deficit that they always suffer in assembly elections, and if they manage to take a lead, I understand that. As a political, I may not like it, but I can understand what's happening there. But a 14 percentage point lead, explain that to me, Shoma. 14 percentage point lead in elections is, in cricket terms, innings defeat with 300 runs additionally there. So if someone tells me that, so there's an innings defeat with 300 runs, and someone says, well, the field placement was not good. Someone says batting order was not good. You would say, bilkul theek hai, field placement was terrible, batting order was wretched. But boss, this is innings defeat. Give me more reasons. Tell me what happened. That's my question in Maharashtra. Yes, BJP had a game plan. Yes, MVA was complacent. Yes, they were arrogant. 14 percentage point. Something is fishy about these results. I do not say EVM, and that's how some people read it. For last 10 years, just on record, for the last 10 years, I have consistently rejected the EVM conspiracy theory. I have said that no, while EVMs can be rigged, and there's absolutely no doubt, we have as yet not had evidence that they have been rigged. These are two different things. Mr. Krishnamurthy is sitting here probably, he would have his own opinions. Yes, it can be rigged, but we have not had evidence that it has been rigged. So when I say something is fishy about these three results, all I'm saying is every possible political explanation, every possible ground feedback, every possible post facto things that you can put in the sink, that does not explain to you what happened. So some steroid, some X factor is at place. I do not know what exactly, but maybe we'll find out in 5 years. Maybe someone's autobiography 20 years later would tell you the truth. But truth does come out. I agree with Bikram.
So, Yogendra, on this, you know, like you said, one thing I'm trying to create with these platforms is evidence-based argument, you know, so I'm going to just park this. You're saying you're mystified by this. But I think a much more, I wouldn't say much more important, but equally important discussion is to say what is going wrong with the liberal project, you know, so even look at America. The fact that 52% women are voting Mr. Trump, you know, when he's putting into the cabinet many people who are actual sexual offenders or have been accused of sexual offense. So there too, there's a sense of steroids, you know, and one can keep denouncing the vision of those who win. But I think it's also very intellectually important, and the courage is needed to say what is going wrong with the articulation of a certain value system that one might think is very important, and you know, which represents there's an electoral democracy and there's a constitutional democracy. Let's say you stand for the value system of a constitutional democracy. What is going wrong with the articulation of that people are fed up of it or not voting for it or feel it's too elitist, whatever it be? What is the introspection you have had about that?
It's a very fair question, and it's a question that must be asked, just as American liberals must ask this question. American liberals on the East Coast and the West Coast are so cut off from the country they live in. The same is true of Indian liberals. I almost feel these are like the Russian elite of the 19th century. You know, the Russian elite used to speak French to each other. and would occasionally be scandalized by what the Russian peasantry was doing. I almost feel this about the Delhi elite. I dare not say anything about Chennai elite. They are, of course, best. But living in Delhi, I feel, so it is true that the secular, liberal, progressive, let's put them all together, secular, liberal, progressive, those who inherited the mantle of this country after independence, they have been completely cut off from the people of this country. And one of the evidence of that is the language in which you and I speak today. You know, how different are we from the Russian elite who spoke to each other in French? There are three cardinal sins of the Indian elite, liberal people like us. We gave up on three things which were absolutely central to our republic, to our nation. Number one, nationalism. Number two, civilizational heritage, a pride in cultural heritage. And number three, our religious heritage, including that of Hinduism. I think the problem with Indian secular liberal intelligentsia, which is not the problem with our nationalist leaders. Our leaders of our freedom struggle were very conscious about this. But post-independence elite, it is so cut off from the country that we started mocking at nationalism. I mean, our nationalism is not Western nationalism. So the guilt, the embarrassment of the European elite about their own nationalism. And of course, Europeans have a good deal to feel embarrassed about their own nationalism, what they call nationalism. We vicariously adopted that. We had no need to. My nationalism was never narrow. My nationalism was never racist. My nationalism never cut me off from anyone else in the country.
It was never expansionist.
My nationalism never pitted me against my neighbor. This was a positive nationalism. So we gave up on nationalism, and sadly, we handed over the legacy of nationalism to those who have not shed one drop of blood to save this country. I am sure historians will record this. I saw a lovely quote saying, history is the handmaiden of the rulers. I think it was attributed to Sampath. How lovely. 10 saal mein kitna badal gaya hai na? History is the handmaiden of rulers. So that's one. Second is our complete indifference to civilizational cultural heritage. Of course, there is a lot of stuff completely rotten about our heritage. Which country doesn't have that? Which civilization doesn't have that? Civilizations are like rivers. They bring water, they bring a lot of dirt, they bring a lot of kooda karkat. So what you need to do is to filter. You don't stop drinking water simply because there is a lot of muck in the river. We, modern, secular, liberal elite, started practicing that. Oh my God, tradition. Oh my God, past, obscurantist. This is what has cut us completely off. And third is religion. I think religion is like a language. In a language, you can write bloodthirsty things, and in a language, you can write love poetry. Religions have been the soul of civilizations, and religions and institutionalized religions have produced some of the most obnoxious things in the world. We, modern secular liberal elite, in our sheer arrogance, thought we knew more than what had been learned in the last 5,000 years. And we started, mocking at religion. Many religions, including Hinduism. And there was a particular unease about Hinduism. These three things, I think, have created a situation where we are so cut off that anyone who puts a little tilak looks like a Hindu. Person could be a goon, could be destroying Hinduism. And I think much of what is being done in the name of Hindutva is a plain and simple destruction of Hinduism. But because someone puts a tilak, and because everyone else is so indifferent and so ill-informed and so ignorant, that this fellow with tulak looks like a Hindu. So we are so ignorant of our past cultures. Anyone who says we had plastic surgery during Ganesha's time looks like someone who's defending our culture. I mean, that's idiotic, but it looks like a defense of our culture. That is what so unless we recover nationalism, all these three belong to us. All these three belong to my freedom struggle. All these are written into this country's constitution. We have given them up, and that is what we are paying the price for.
So, Yogendra, I'm really, in a way, it kind of is of the theme of this evening. One is about the way history is written, and I'm going to come back to religion and cultural heritage. I think that's important, and then we'll speak about caste as well. But, Vikram brought this up, and there's a foreword in his book where there's this meeting of how to write the curriculum of history, And there was this decision to airbrush, say the depredations of Tipu because it would be a thorn in the side. So one, what do you think about that? Like how should history be addressed, say a book like Tipu Sultan, and where the Congress ends up valorizing these characters, the BJP ends up denouncing them, and you keep saying Aurangzeb ki aulad when you talk about the modern Muslim community. So you've already decoded what has gone wrong. How does one fix this? How can history be correctly addressed? How can religion become a very vivid part of our public life? How can Hinduism in particular be expressed more confidently by liberals? And the cultural heritage. So you said what all has gone wrong, what are the absences. Give me some positive ideas of how they can come back and flow into public life in positive ways.
I'm no historian, and it is not for me to give lectures on how history should be written. All I want is yes, no airbrushing, and yes, no igniting of hatred. I think I understand that there was a moment in our history, national history after independence, when many of the very embarrassing and potentially explosive episodes in our history were kind of covered up. Covered up because I think our historians and our nation, remember these were years of nation building, they thought that if we put these things out to the public, to the next generations, are we sowing seeds of conflict? They were wrong, but it was done with a good intention. This is what you and I would do in our families. There are very embarrassing things about every family's history. We decide what do we want to pass on to our children, what is it that we don't want to pass on, or when is it that I want to tell my son or my daughter about this very deeply wounded part of my country, my family's history. So it's done with that. And then comes someone who says, truth must be told. I'll tell you what happened. And I do it when I know this is what's happening in the country. This is no truth-telling. This is actually creating rift. This is creating hatred. This is the most irresponsible thing that you can do so. And today, these things must be told. Because if someone had done it 25 years ago, if someone had done these things 30 years ago, when the left liberal academia ruled in this country, I would have said, all right, at least there is courage of conviction. Today, it is part of, so there's a communal division of labor. I will simply gather evidence. I will not touch any sword or anything. Someone else will come and pick up that evidence, and I will, of course, gather it for the purpose that someone can come and pick it up and use it. But I think that's utterly irresponsible. To come back to the larger thing that you're saying.
No, I just want to say one thing there, Yogendra, because like I said, it should not be a free, we all have our particular perspectives, and then we're all capable of bias. And I think it's, again, I keep saying it's intellectually important and courageous to understand, like you've just articulated what's wrong in the liberal project, there are some things that must be right in the BJP or the RSS project for it to resonate, and how do you filter? I love the metaphor you just used about a filter, because if you completely make a binary, it's again a blind spot, you know? So I want to come back to what you said about, yes, at the beginning of India, when partition had just happened, the wounds were very raw, you know, there was so much of fire in the country that, like you just said, it's a wonderful idea that when you're young in the family, you don't talk about some things, but when you reach adulthood, it's time to face up and look at things and distinguish. You know, I think Vikram made an important point that what Tipu Sultan was or what Aurangzeb was should have absolutely no relevance to what a modern-day Muslim Indian citizen has. And anybody who tries to collate the two, both with good intent or with bad intent, is something that one should resist, you know. So one is this, that do you think India has reached an adulthood when things should come up, be discussed with good intent and set aside? That's one. And secondly, do you think that as much as you are analyzing what's wrong with the liberal project, do you need to analyze something about what might be right while resisting what's wrong with the BJP and Hindutva project? Do you think that you also need to acknowledge some things which might be right? Why is it resonating?
I don't need to acknowledge that it's right to see why it has resonated. Simply because, for example, I don't need to say what is right about Mr. Trump to acknowledge why Americans vote for him. He's a lout. He's a shame on humanity. People vote for him. I need to understand that. I don't need to agree with him. I don't need to say find 10 virtues in Mr. Trump in order to understand why people vote for him. So yes.
But wouldn't that analysis make one blind to certain sociological things that are happening? Would that not?
I hope, Shoma, I was actually putting some things which most secular people will not talk about. I've actually said that that our modernity of the kind that we have created in the last 75 years is vacuous. It has created a vacuum, a cultural, spiritual vacuum. And some criminals have walked into that vacuum. Now, I would hold ourselves responsible for creating that vacuum. The trouble is Indian modernity is so, the modernity that we created and gave to ourselves is so pathetically imitative. Our greatest economists cannot think that India can have a path of development which would be different from Europe. So that is mental slavery. Most of us ask most Indian intellectuals, when was the last time you read a book in any language other than English? Or ask an intellectual, when was the last time you wrote an A4 sheet in a language other than English? The answers would be very, very embarrassing. And that is the heart of the problem. We have created a vacuum, a cultural, moral, spiritual vacuum. And because there is a vacuum, any Baba walks in, you know, this is the age of Babas. So it's not just in politics that thugs are coming. Thugs are also coming in religion. Because of this vacuum, Babas come in. Because of this vacuum, a certain kind of politics, and not just among Hindus. RSS is not the only culprit. You have similar organizations among Muslims. You have similar politics happening among the Sikhs. Because of this vacuum, we have invited a certain very crass kind of politics, which is destructive for our country. So I understand why RSS has come in. And let me also say that one of the things that we must understand is that RSS has worked for 100 years. I do not see any secular organization in this country which has worked for 100 months. So there's a difference.
So, you know, I want to come back to this idea of, I would pursue the religion and cultural heritage because I think it's very important, but, you know, I want to cover more ground. Let's just look at this as a thought seeder session. The whole idea of secularism, and that brings me into the Uniform Civil Code, the triple talaq issue, the whole sort of issue around Muslims and how Muslims can represent and express themselves in modern polity. To my mind, I feel that they're imprisoned between, you know, the sort of completely misplaced construct of secularists, and then also the misplaced construct of, say, the BJP and the RSS. And there again, I say, when construct of the way secularists have expressed your relationship with minority politics in India, and similarly with the BJP and how they represent it. So my question there, Yogendra, would be that, do you think the secular project is in a way imprisoning Muslims in like a sort of noblesse oblige, you know? The cultural practices that say Hindus would fight in your own community, the Hindu Code Bill has been fought, it's been legislated, it's been argued and debated, you know, widow remarriage, sati, child marriage, dowry, you name it, all those ills of society would not have got fixed unless there was a propulsion to fix it. But when the issue of, say, some gender inequitable practices in the Muslim community come up, liberals have a knee-jerk reaction of protecting their right to be that way, will not have an adult dialogue about it, will not just be, like, treat them as equals. I feel like it's a reverse sort of communalism of, like I said, keeping it in its most regressive self. Maulvis are the representatives of Muslims, whereas none of the Dharam Sansad sadhus are being presented as representatives of Hindus, you know? So how do you think secularism now needs to address itself? And what's your position on the Uniform Civil Code?
I think we need to speak very frankly about what has ailed secular politics in our country. But that conversation would be incomplete without prefacing it by saying that today, to understand the failures of secularism is important, but to not underline the fact that what we are going through today is a complete inversion of Indian Constitution. Minorities, especially Muslims, have been reduced to the status of second-rank citizenship, and that this is an assault on minority, a state-sponsored assault on minorities is something that needs to be recognized. Having prefaced it by saying so, I would say the secular project has been deeply flawed in our country. It is flawed for several reasons. Number one, secular politics, which began as a politics of conviction, standing for secular cause in the 1950s, must have been a heroic effort. It became a matter of convenience. And after a few years, it became almost a compulsion. And secular politics has actually used Muslims as a hostage. It's a cruel thing to say, but it must be said. This is, if you look at, I'll draw an example from American politics if it surprises you. In American politics, they say Republicans won't do a thing for the blacks because they know blacks won't vote for them. Democrats won't do a thing for blacks because they know they have no option except to vote for them. This is the dilemma of Indian Muslims. They have been trapped. They have been confined to a very limited options. And secular, those who call themselves, secular is a word which is seriously misunderstood and misused. But those who call themselves secular parties have actually played a very cruel game with, especially with Muslims, which is to say, I'll give you security. Don't ask me for roads, don't ask me for development, don't ask me for education, don't ask me for health. So something that every other Indian community can ask for, can fight for, can demand, Muslims cannot demand because tumhe dange se bacha lenge. And as you know, in earlier days, if there was no riot, somehow some riot was engineered to remind the Muslims where they were and why they needed protection. So it turned into a very unholy contract. And in that unholy contract, a certain set of a criminal kind of politics has walked into that. So yes, I agree. Secular politics has been deeply flawed for setting up this very unholy relationship. Secular politics is also flawed because they have not had the courage, because they were using Muslims in this way, they have not had the courage to speak about many of the ills concerning Muslim community. And three, secular politics has had no knowledge of our religious traditions. So yes, these are the problems. On the women-related issues, I think this used to be a problem of secular politics till the 1980s, till Shah Bano, which was a major letdown for secular politics. After that, I think secular politics has learned lessons in this respect. I do not know.
Even right now with triple talaq, yes, the criminalization of it, that's a whole long discussion, I won't get into it. But on
Shoma,
triple talaq,
tell me these names of those secular organizations who have defended triple talaq. I know of many organizations who have been working, and actually they wrote to say, we welcome it, stop triple talaq. The trouble is that given BJP's media power, these days they have also acquiring some history writing powers, which they did not have, and given their entire ecosystem of media, they keep creating this, inventing these myths about liberals who are defending triple talaq. Just name them. Why don't you name them?
Yogendra, because, as I said, I'm trying to create a space which is very fair. I'm not going to let you get away with that remark that you just made about BJP acquiring history writing power, because again, it's something that one has to look at fairly, that if the Marxists or the liberal project could have very clearly history writers that were aligned to a particular vision of society, another competing political dispensation that has its own vision of society, why would they not have a sort of growing ring of intellectuals that whether economists or historians or etc.?
I don't resent that. I don't object to that. As I said, history is the handmaiden of rulers. So rulers have changed, history will also change. I can see that.
Right. As I said, I hope we can keep, with these discussions, keep moving. I mean, the way you are analyzing the absences and gaps of a worldview that you stand for and you sweat for and you walk for and you strive for, that itself is a great act of intellectual courage, Yogendra. So that's really important. From where I am at, I'm increasingly trying to understand when a vision that I don't subscribe to, when, I don't want to just have a binary on it. I want to understand the filter, of what about it is right and what about it is worth fighting against, rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Because I think this filtration metaphor you've used is very, very important to take us all back to a center rather than being caught between extreme left or extreme right, But that's just me using my spot to say things. I think we've run out of time, Yogendra. I'm going to just pose one question to you on the caste census, because that has been really at the heart of so much of national debate. It's a very complex issue, so it's unfair to ask you to come at it in a short time. But why do you have been really batting for it. Why do you want the caste census? What do you think it'll really achieve? Secondly, Karnataka has had a caste census, doesn't want to publish it. Bihar has had a caste census, has published it. But, the whole Hindi heartland, not much societal transformation has come out of it. So, and there are two arguments. One is that it will create better policy and justice. The other is that it will fracture society more and more and more into literally crystallizing caste identity as the only lever of leverage. So help us understand why you are backing it.
I thought, Shoma, you've been making a case for this. You constantly said evidence-based, evidence-based, evidence-based. That's what I'm saying, evidence-based. If you have, we must be the only country in the world which has legal provisions for giving benefits of jobs and education to a category X, but which refuses to count that category. I mean, I do not know of any country in the world which practices a weird thing like this. To my mind, any inequality in the world, whether it's a gender inequality or caste or race or anything, you counter, and if you are serious about countering, eliminating that inequality, step one is collect evidence. Now, the weird thing about our country is that at that stage we are being stopped. No, 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 don't collect evidence. Ever heard something as weird as that? You know, there are many people who are opposed to reservations, and I respect that. Most of those people say, you know, if you really look at it, caste is no longer the issue. You know, economic inequality is the real issue. Fair enough, that's your opinion. Let's have evidence. When I start collecting evidence, those very people stand up and say, "No, evidence ikattha mat karna." Arey Baba, what's that? So what is caste census? Caste census is not only gathering numeric strength of each caste and community. Caste census is actually gathering the most comprehensive set of data on educational, economic, occupational, assets, and social profile of each community at each level. So if I have caste census, I should be able to say that this community in this particular block of District X of Tamil Nadu, how many of them are matriculate, how many of them are graduates, how many of them have certain kinds of jobs. Don't we need that information? Even those who are opposed to reservation, and if they're absolutely honest about their belief, they should demand this, because that evidence would then enable them to prove that you don't need caste-based evidence, caste-based reservations. You know? So to my mind, opposing collection of evidence itself is a rather strange thing. And any modern country, anywhere in the world, if you think that there is an aspect of life which may pose inequality, etc., you collect evidence. As you know, because quoting the US is very useful in our country, in the US, every single factory, every single enterprise has to fill a form every year to describe the ethnic composition of their employees. How many whites, how many blacks, how many this. Why can't we have that? So that's all that caste census is about. Will it lead to stronger caste identities? Welcome to any village of India. Who doesn't know who's caste? ये हम शहरों में रह के पता नहीं हमारे दिमाग में क्या चीज चलती है. Everyone knows everyone's caste. Your caste census is not going to reveal anything new for that village. And every politician in this country, and I'm sure in Tamil Nadu, walks with a list in his pocket of the number of caste and subcaste in his constituency. You are not going to tell them anything new. The only thing new that we would gather is for purposes of policy making, which is very badly needed. And can I just quickly say one thing about Uniform Civil Code, which you had asked and I did not? Actually, I should say I support the idea of Uniform Civil Code. I think it's an idea enshrined in our Constitution. The idea that uniform set of principles must guide all family laws is a wonderful progressive idea. The trouble with the current regime's push for Uniform Civil Code is that they actually don't want a Uniform Civil Code. They want to push the Hindu Civil Code on everyone else. That is a problem. Otherwise, a Uniform Civil Code, to my mind, the simple rule is, this is a country that believes in equality, gender equality. No religion in this country should be allowed to get away with any practice in their family code in the name of anything which is anti-women. That, to my mind, is Uniform Civil Code. It should be applied.
Yogendra, on that note, I have to stop, though we could talk about this, so many issues, we could keep talking about it, but thank you for your literally candidness and self-reflection, which is super important. I just wanted to say about the Uniform Civil Code that there's an argument that why not disable all the gender iniquitous laws rather than come up with one elephant that will fit everyone. And, you know, because with the Uttarakhand Uniform Civil Code, there's one clause which says if you're having a relationship as adults, you have to go and inform the police and let them know that you're in a relationship. Or if you break the relationship, you have to again inform the police. So forming some new structure is quite scary. I think we should disable the bad structures and leave it at that. You know?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Uniform principles, but differentiated rules. Let Hindus have their own practices, let Muslims have their own practices, and their own codes. But anything that goes against principle of equality between men and women should be eliminated from every code. That is exactly what I believe.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Yogendra. We're going to stop for a quick break. The bar is open, there's cocktails, there's food, and then we'll come back for one more mega session on how India and ancient India, some of the themes we've been talking about, shaped the entire Western world and Southeast Asia. William Dalrymple will be here after this cocktail break. Look forward to having all of you back soon. Thank you.